are an impatient society. We want what we want, when we want it, and how we want it. We want express lanes on our interstate highways, express lines in our grocery stores, fast food, Jiffy Lube for quick oil changes, and even minute clinics if we're not feeling well. And we had all that up until early March, when our way of life was suddenly halted due to a virus which we cannot control. Today is one of those days that we would traditionally want to gloss over, to get past what actually happened, why and how it happened, and in essence, to get to the good part. But as Fulton Sheehan wrote, there had to be a Good Friday before there could be an Easter Sunday. So here we are, Good Friday, and it's quiet. I'm not sure how many of you had to work today, and with the current situation, I find myself keeping the television off due to the 24/7 coronavirus media blitz. So if this had been a little over 2,000 years ago, we probably wouldn't have known what had happened on that skull-shaped hill outside of Jerusalem, Golgotha. In Aramaic, that means skull, also known as Calvary, from the Latin word calva, meaning bald head. So let's take today's technology of television and 24-hour news coverage and, using our imaginations, transport ourselves back to that Friday in Jerusalem. This is what we might have seen and heard. The news announcer might have started off the story with, "The execution today of Jesus of Nazareth took place in such an unusual manner that this reporter believes he knew what was going to happen and did nothing to stop it. Those I've talked to describe it as a plot by religious authorities to silence one of the most independent and refreshing voices of our time." We would have seen Jesus, Peter, James, and John leave the Passover feast and head to the Garden of Gethsemane. The apostles were tired and fell asleep quickly. Jesus was distraught over what was going to happen. He knew why one of them had left early, and that's why we should never leave Mass early. We have seen Jesus ask his Heavenly Father to take this cup away, but he realized this had to be done, so he readily accepted his fate. Medical sources have verified that under severe emotional stress, that Jesus could have very well sweated blood, which would have dropped to the ground in clots. The medical term for that is hematidrosis. Then here comes one of his 12, Judas Iscariot, the voice of betrayal, to deliver the kiss, which would ultimately lead to Jesus' death. How many times have we been betrayed? Or worse, have we betrayed someone? Imagine how Jesus felt. Someone he loved, traveled with, had good times with, decided to sell him out for 30 pieces of silver. Or if you read the book of Exodus in the Old Testament, the price of a slave. And today's market value for silver, Jesus' life is worth about $200. The tragedy of this is that Judas might have very well been a saint today, if only he had come back, even to the foot of the cross, and let one drop of that most precious blood fall upon him as he asked for forgiveness, and let that droplet cleanse his heart and wash away all of his sins. We're lucky. We have that forgiveness available to us through the sacrament of confession. And to think all we need to do is ask. We have heard the commotion as Jesus was bound and taken away. We see Peter following close by, James and John? Were they just looking out for themselves? Aren't we sometimes like that? When it's convenient, we like to be known as followers of Christ. But when the going gets tough, we are nowhere to be found. We see Jesus before Caiaphas, the high priest, and the voice of condemnation. The interrogation is one-sided and prejudiced against him. What about us? Have we found ourselves falsely accused and made to suffer, even though we are innocent? And how many times have we condemned others without reason? While Jesus is inside, we find Peter, the voice of denial, outside in the courtyard. What was going through Jesus' mind? He knew what was going on and might have even heard some of Peter's conversation. Jesus might have been thinking, here's my closest friend, the one I picked to lead my church, the one I truly trusted, my buddy, my closest ally. Is there no one that's going to stand up for me? Am I truly all alone? Deserted by his followers, betrayed and denied. How many of us have found ourselves in that same situation through some of life's most difficult times and struggles? Have we ever walked away from someone we love or who needed us? How many times have we put our faith into our back pockets, out of sight, for fear of being ridiculed or made fun of? Then Jesus is sent off to Pilate, the Roman governor, the one with the power to pronounce the death sentence. Pilate is the voice of evasion. He knew he had to keep the peace. The eyes of Rome were upon him. If he messed up and allowed a revolt, he knew he was out of a job and would be sent to the far reaches of the empire, if he was that lucky. Or else he himself might receive the sentence of death. So he took the easy way out, gave the people a choice, Jesus or Barabbas. He figured they want Jesus. Boy, did he get that one wrong. He washes his hands and thinking, I'm just giving them what they want. How about us? How often have we been a Pilate? When have we compromised our faith beliefs to keep the peace? When have we decided that we would become a cafeteria Catholic? One who follows what we want to follow and leave the other teachings behind. The courtyard is filled with the chief priests, the voice of deception, along with the mob, the voices of hatred. They're out for blood. They want Jesus killed, but why? Perhaps they were scared. Scared that this new law that Jesus had been preaching about, to love, to forgive, to be merciful, to share what we have, our time, our talents, and our treasures, might just catch on and become the way to live. If that happened, they would lose the wealth and power that they had accumulated over the years. Let's be honest. We've all been deceived and pressured to do things we shouldn't do. Temptations are there all around us. And yes, they do look appealing. That mob, the ones who were waving palm branches and singing his praises on Sunday, are out here today, screaming for his blood. Oh yes, that can be us as well. One minute we are all gung-ho for the faith. And the next, well, not quite as strong as we should be. Pilate pronounces the sentence, and Jesus is sent off to die. But before that, he is to be flogged. Remember the sweating of blood in the garden? Well, this makes the skin ultra-sensitive to the flogging which the Roman soldiers administered. They whipped him as if he were an animal. On his back, his legs, and his chest. The whips were leather with pieces of bone, metal, or rock attached to the ends, so that with each crack of the whip, the skin would be shredded. There's also evidence on the Shroud of Turin that Jesus' nose was broken, and he had a large bruise on his right cheek, given by those soldiers. Then, if that wasn't enough, they mock him by crowning him with a crown of thorns. The evidence is that these thorns were 2 inches long, and that it could have been more of a cap covering Jesus' entire scalp. They put a cloak on him over that bleeding, sweaty body. And the blood, of course, coagulates, adhering to the cloth. And the skin, together, not to mention the salty sweat, flowing into those open wounds. Remember how it feels to have a Band-Aid ripped off of a wound? Not even close to what Jesus endured. We see Jesus led to Golgotha. The Romans had been using crucifixion for years. Historians say the Persians were the first, and that Alexander the Great introduced it to the Egyptians and Carthaginians, and the Romans picked it up and perfected it from them. They would crucify on sites where it could be readily seen, as if it was a billboard saying, "See what happens when you don't obey us." The idea is simple: slow, maximum pain and suffering death. Disgraceful, cruel, and humiliating. The church added the loincloth. The Romans crucified naked. It was used for slaves, foreigners, revolutionaries, and the vilest of criminals. Jesus probably only carried the crossbeam, rough, unfinished wood, anywhere from 75 to 125 pounds. Imagine how fatigued and emotionally spent he must have been. He hadn't eaten, probably hadn't had any water, and the only voices he had heard were those of hatred, denial, condemnation, deception, and evasion. The blood loss and pain was very evident on his most precious face. That face which had only shown love, mercy, and forgiveness to everyone. And now subjected to carrying that beam that would be the object of his death. He arrives at the site of his execution, is forcibly stripped and nailed to the cross. These weren't small penny nails, but rather more in the line of a railroad tie spike. The best explanation of the pain that Jesus suffered when those nails were driven into his body is to remember the pain caused when a nerve in your tooth is touched. Now consider that Jesus, beaten, bloody, severe fluid loss, cramping from the loss of salt, tried to move while hanging there to alleviate some of the pain. In the pain in the feet, he would sink down, and in his arms and hands, he'd lift himself up. The whole time, his raw, bloody back rubbing against that unfinished, splintered piece of wood. He did this for 3 hours. Then he looked down to see his mother standing there, tears in her eyes, and there's nothing he can do except wait. He gave her to us. What a great and most precious gift we have in our Blessed Mother. Do we remember her when we are undergoing trials and tribulations in our own life? Why do we pray and ask for Mary's help? One simple reason: all good boys will listen to their mothers. Imagine how she felt. They say one of the most painful occurrences in a parent's life is to lose a child. What parent doesn't want to do all they can to help their children in a time of great need? Jesus finally hears a kind voice, that of Dismas, also known as the good thief. He was a man condemned and dying, who recognized Jesus for who he really is, the Son of God, and asks him for a simple favor. Remember me. Jesus tells him what all of us will want to hear. Today, you will be with me in paradise. Doesn't that show us in real terms that it's never too late to turn back to God? The time is up. The mission accomplished. Jesus breathes his last, gives up his spirit, and dies. That cross, which we originally viewed as an instrument of death, has now become the instrument of salvation for all of us. And now comes two more positive voices. The first is that of affirmation. Saint Longinus, the Roman centurion. Yes, you heard right. He converted to Catholicism and was canonized. He was the one who struck the lance into Jesus' side to ensure he was dead and declared, truly he was the Son of God. Then there's the voice of courage. Joseph of Arimathea, who goes and asks Pilate for the body of Jesus so that it could be properly buried. He gave Jesus the only gift he could, his own tomb. And now we know that this story gets even better. We know what happens on the third day, on Sunday, or to quote that famous radio personality Paul Harvey, and now we know the rest of the story. In just a few minutes, we will all have the opportunity to say thank you to Jesus by venerating our crosses. I'm going to ask that if you have any hatred, betrayal, denial, deception, or condemnation in your heart, that you leave it at the foot of that cross. Remember that he died for all of us. So let's leave those feelings which will kill us there and allow Jesus to shower us with the feelings of courage, affirmation, love, and thankfulness for the greatest gift that we have ever received. It was certainly a strange mix at Calvary. One side was fear, hate, and stupidity, and the other was faith, hope, and love. Were you there when they crucified our Lord? We were all there and still are today. So the one question I will leave with you to ponder and reflect on is this. Which side will you stand on? Will you say by your life and the way you live, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord? Or will you say by your life and the way you live, crucify him, and like Pilate, wash your hands of him?